Have you ever thought about how one tiny change could set off a huge chain reaction? I mean, what if the secret to totally transforming your life, or even a giant company, wasn't about making 100 different changes, but just one? Sounds kind of impossible, right? Well, today we're going to dig into this idea, the incredible power of the first domino. Okay, I want you to picture this. It's 1987. You're an investor at Alcoa, this massive aluminum company, and things are not great. The company's struggling. So you're all gathered to hear from the brand new CEO, a guy named Paul O'Neill. You're on the edge of your seat, just waiting to hear his brilliant plan to boost profits. He gets up to the microphone, and the first thing he talks about is worker safety. Not profits, not cutting costs, worker safety.
I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Everybody was just stunned. People were probably looking at each other like, is he serious? Why on earth would the new boss of a struggling company start off by talking about something that seemed so unimportant to the bottom line? What was he even thinking? Honestly, it just sounded like complete madness.
So, was he crazy or was he a genius? Let's dive into just how bizarre this whole thing seemed at the time.
So here's the situation in a nutshell. 1987, Alcoa's performance is basically in the gutter. O'Neill gets up there, in front of all these nervous investors, and he completely blows past their number one concern, profits. And the reaction? Oh, it was immediate panic. There's this famous story of one money manager who literally ran out of the room, called his clients, and told them to sell all their stock because, and I quote, some crazy hippie had taken over and was going to run the company straight into the ground.
But here's the thing. He wasn't a crazy hippie at all. He was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. What looked like this totally bizarre, out-of-touch priority was actually the very first, most critical move in what would become a legendary corporate turnaround. This is where we get to a secret weapon, the first domino effect.
See, what O'Neill had figured out was something called a Keystone Habit. So what is that? Well, a Keystone Habit is one single core habit that kicks off a chain reaction. It starts to shift and improve all these other patterns around it, almost without you even trying. It's not about trying to change 100 things at once. Nope. It's about finding that one thing that when you change it, changes everything else.
And this is the perfect way to think about it. Imagine a huge, long line of dominoes all set up. You don't have to go and push every single one over, right? That would take forever. All you have to do is focus your energy on tipping over that very first one. And once you do, whoosh, it creates this incredible ripple effect that does all the heavy lifting for you. And that, right there, was O'Neill's entire strategy. Worker safety, that was his first domino.
Okay, so how did this actually play out? Well, first, O'Neill got everyone focused on a single goal that nobody could really argue against, keeping workers safe. I mean, who's going to say no to that? But here's the genius part. To actually achieve that goal, they were forced to build way better communication systems. And once those systems were in place and people felt like the company actually cared about them, it created this huge sense of pride. And the final outcome, which seems almost like magic, all that new efficiency and pride made profits shoot through the roof to an all-time high.
Let's dig into that a little more, because this is where it gets really cool. See, focusing on safety wasn't just about safety. All of a sudden, you had unions and management, groups that were always fighting, working together on a shared goal. It made the workers feel truly valued as human beings. And get this, to make the new safety plan work, they needed a way to report any injury anywhere in the world within 24 hours. So they had to build a whole new communication system, which basically became one of the world's first global corporate email systems. Plus, any machine that was even a little bit broken got fixed right away to prevent accidents, which, surprise, surprise, also made the whole operation way more efficient. It literally touched every single part of the business.
So, the big question is, did it actually work? Oh yeah, it worked big time. By the time Paul O'Neill retired 13 years later, Alcoa's net income was 5 times higher than when he'd started. That so-called crazy hippie ended up making his investors an absolute fortune, all by focusing on something that wasn't money.
Okay, so that's a pretty amazing business story, right? But this idea isn't just for Fortune 500 companies. This is where it gets really interesting for you and me, because this concept applies to our personal lives just as much, maybe even more. Let's step out of the boardroom.
Take a look at someone like Michael Phelps, one of the greatest Olympians of all time. His coach didn't try to control every single thing he did. Instead, they focused on one key habit, visualization. Every single morning and every single night,
Phelps would mentally play out the perfect race in his mind. Now, just like safety at Alcoa wasn't really just about safety, this visualization wasn't just about swimming. It was all about building this rock-solid, unshakable mental game. So by the time he actually dove into the pool for a real race, he'd already won it in his head 1,000 times. And that created this cascade of confidence and focus that, well, led to a whole lot of Olympic gold medals.
All right, so a giant company, a world-class athlete, that's all pretty inspiring. But you might be thinking, what about for regular people like us? Well, the good news is the principle works exactly the same. Let's bring it down to something super simple, the act of just writing stuff down.
So there was this study where researchers asked people to do just one thing. Not diet, not exercise, nothing crazy. They just had to write down what they ate only one day a week. That's it. And what happened? Well, that one simple act, food journaling, turned into a keystone habit. All of a sudden, people started noticing their own patterns. Like, oh, I always grab chips when I'm bored. And just that awareness gave them a new sense of control. And from there, without anyone telling them to, they started planning healthier meals on their own. The first domino just knocked over all the others.
So why does this work so well? What's actually happening in our brains that makes this so powerful? Well, it all boils down to the science of what we call small wins.
The key idea here is one word: leverage. A keystone habit is basically a lever for your life. You know how a lever lets you use a small amount of effort to move something huge? That's exactly what this is. You're applying a small amount of force, just one new habit, to get this massive, outsized result. It's the absolute best return you can get on your willpower.
And here's how that leverage gets created. First, these habits generate small wins. These are tiny victories that start to build momentum and, more importantly, belief that you can actually do this. They start to create a whole new culture in your life, an atmosphere where other good habits just feel easier to start. And all this feeds into this amazing upward spiral of confidence and feeling like you're in control.
So let's be clear on what we mean by small wins. Really, you can just think of them as the fuel for this whole engine. They're these little, concrete successes that prove to your brain, hey, look, this is working. Change is possible. Every small win you rack up makes you believe that the next, bigger goal is totally within your reach. It's the proof you need to keep the momentum going.
Okay, so we've seen how this one idea can totally transform a massive company, help an athlete win gold medals, and even improve our own health. So now we get to the most important part of this whole conversation. What about you? What's your first domino?
And that's what I want to leave you with. This doesn't have to be some huge, monumental thing. Seriously. Maybe it's just making your bed every single morning. Maybe it's taking a 5-minute walk on your lunch break. Or maybe it's writing down just one thing you're grateful for before you go to sleep. So think about it. What is that one single habit for you? The one that, if you just focused all your energy on tipping over that one little domino, could set off a chain reaction of positive change across your entire life.